Okay, hey everyone, welcome to The Field Between. My name is Ahmed.
And I'm Yasmin.
Today we're going to be talking about an article by Noura Harakat. What's it called?
It's published in the Boston Review, and it is called The Boomerang Comes Back. But before that, we'll start with some updates. I know you got some items for us.
I do?
I think you said you did.
No, I don't know.
Oh, if you don't, that's okay too.
I might not. Yeah, okay. What are your updates?
I guess we'll find out. My updates, we had an event called Voices for Sudan this weekend on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Say more about it.
Did you forget about that?
Yeah, I did.
So it was a collaboration between a couple of different people, a friend of ours who is also my work colleague, the collective that I ran with our very good friend North Carolina, Tabaddal, and Caravanserai, which is the cafe.
Yeah.
And it went really well, alhamdulillah. It was really gratifying. It was a little nerve-wracking because we had such good turnout. We had about 70 people in the house, which is definitely the most that we've had here.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah. I think that
I will say I made the exact right number of drinks.
Did you? That's very good.
Everyone got drinks, and I think the people who wanted multiple got multiple. It was like one of those times when my supply chain professor would order the exact right number of slices of pizza for everyone because
I've heard you talk about this guy before.
Ran it through his predictive model. Yeah.
No, that's a good thing. It's cool to see how that happens with experience. And you had chai and also karkade, which is like a hibiscus drink. And yeah, people were able to have both or either or one. I think 50 is our comfortable max. I think 70 is a little tight. And just like maybe a fire hazard. So we'll probably ticket events that we expect to kind of like reach beyond our more everyday networks. But it was really cool. I think I knew about like half the people probably, which meant that I met a lot of people. We were really able to get very lucky, I was going to say, to get some like local people from Pittsburgh who are also part of the Sudanese diaspora who did an excellent job kind of cultivating conversation. Including, I think I can say her name, right? Because she's fairly well known, Rania Maymoon, who's a novelist and who is at City of Asylum, which is a project here in Pittsburgh that has artists who are also refugees who are then in residency. We showed a short film called Al Sit that Tabaddal, when my friend was running the event in Durham, had already shown that went well. And then we showed an explainer on the current conflict, which I found really helpful, honestly. I like that we didn't just make it about the conflicts, that we also talked about like Sudanese culture and history, but that we were able to provide some context, especially with our speakers. Yeah. So I was really happy.
I will say one of the standout moments, I think someone in the audience said that they learned more about Sudan in that hour than they had their entire life, which I think is impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like I feel like I learned a lot too. Like I think I should have done a better job kind of educating myself earlier. If you're not familiar with the conflict at all, I feel like a very like overarching picture is that there's basically two generals who are fighting each other with militia, and the civilians are like on the losing end. So it was helpful to sort of discuss and get more context. And besides that, I think that's like the only thing I really remember for the weekend. I've been feeling kind of overwhelmed and tired. But we had a good like little meeting Monday and figured out how to recalibrate some things. So I'm feeling better now and like a little bit back in control. It's my spring break next week, so I'm looking forward to that. Though I'll be spending most of that time working on my article, but it'll be a nice change of pace.
Finishing your article.
Yes, inshallah.
Not just working on it.
No, you're right.
Completing it.
I will be completing it.
Don't come back. Don't even think about coming back. Your ass is going to be walking back if it's not finished by the end of the week.
Ahmed is very, very sweetly driving me 2 hours, which then means he has to drive 2 hours back. So it's 4 hours round trip for him to like, where am I going? The middle of Pennsylvania?
I don't remember.
Some small town in Pennsylvania.
It starts either Benton or Benson.
Well, don't say the exact town. What if they try and come get me?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, someone's going to stop you from writing this
They're going to kidnap me and I won't be able to finish my article.
You probably want that.
Anyway, he's driving me, which is so sweet because we're on a little bit of a budget right now. So it's honestly like, I really appreciate the gesture. It's very sweet of you. I mean, we took money out of savings, honestly, which is, objectively not necessary, but like I personally really appreciate it.
Well, we might be getting a $5,000 check from Doge.
Oh yeah, us personally?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Every tax-paying household.
Great.
Is what I'm told. I've been promised that, so
Okay.
I'm sure they will not
Hopefully that
fall
evens
through on that
out.
promise.
Yeah. I mean, my job's more in jeopardy now than ever, thanks to Elon. But those $5,000 will help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. How are you? What's new with you?
I'm really tired. I did not sleep well last night.
You woke up for like 2 hours. Just so sad.
And I had some neck pain that was getting in the way of sleeping, which feels better today.
Okay. Inshallah, you sleep better tonight.
Yeah. I don't know. What have I been up to? Not much.
You've been writing your screenplay.
Been baking a lot.
You've
last
gotten
couple
back
of
into
days,
baking, which has been delicious.
Taught our neighbors how to bake.
Yeah, it's really nice having neighbors again that we like know.
Yeah.
What else have you been up to?
That's
Ramadan.
it. Just events.
Ramadan is starting on Saturday as of
Yeah.
us recording this, so that's exciting.
That is exciting. And we're going to be doing the late night Ramadan cafes.
Yeah, which I think will be really fun. So on Fridays from 8 to 12, we'll be having like a cafe for anyone who wants to come by, which I think will be nice. I hope people come out, and there's not really that many late night options that are non-alcoholic in Pittsburgh, so that should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The closest kahwa house is 162 miles away.
Yeah. If you're not familiar.
Actually, I guess that Yemeni cafe in Oakland is opening soon.
Yeah, but I still haven't seen them drop dates, so.
Yeah, they're doing a small opening this week.
Oh, are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's very smart timing with Ramadan.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely, the more the merrier. We'll definitely check them out.
Yeah.
You think they're competition?
No, we'll check them out.
I mean,
I wish them success.
we can't be open every day of the week because we also live here. So, maybe people come to us on Fridays and they go there on Saturdays or whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you going to do during Ramadan? Real quick, and then we'll get into this article.
Yeah. I'm trying to pace myself. I'm trying to slow down a little bit and be intentional. I feel like I set too many goals last year, and then I was upset when I didn't accomplish them. So I've tried to set more realistic goals. My main thing I really want to do, though, is just like feel a little bit more emotionally centered. I feel like I've been just like a little bit stressed with work and stuff. And so, obviously I can't completely eliminate that, but really taking some time to like spiritually center. I think my biggest goal is to pray before I go to work or before I leave the house. I'm very, very out of habit of praying. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that. Yeah. How about you? We're going to be reading the Burda together, which is a poem about the prophet. So that'll be cool.
Learned about it from a white guy.
Yeah, you did. I didn't, I should say, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think reading that with you, I've got some projects that just are not really spiritual goals that I have an end of Ramadan deadline for.
Projects multiple or the screenplay?
Multiple. Well, I guess the screenplay, but now I'm thinking about this landlord rating.
No, don't say it because someone will steal it. I actually think it's an excellent idea.
Well, if someone steals it and does it, that's great.
Bleep it out.
The
Bleep it
point is
out.
that-
No, I think it's really a good idea. Ahmed's not going to be able to put this in the podcast, but he has a good app idea. Whoever I've told it about, I've kept track. I've only told 3 people.
Okay.
They all.
You're just like,
Okay, but we have like 50
you don't tell
to,
anyone. I've been telling
we
people.
have like 50 to 100 people listen, alhamdulillah. So that's different than just 3 people I know personally. No, I think that I think you should do that, but I feel like it's a little unrealistic perhaps to have 2 projects that have Ramadan deadline.
That's true.
I feel like you should just.
But for this other thing, I'm using ChatGPT to generate a lot of the architecture and.
Have you asked a friend to help you code it? Because ChatGPT uses a lot of power.
Water.
Yeah.
How much water do people use?
Not as much
If
as
I ask a guy to do it, think about how much
I
water
had
this
one
guy's
lecture
drinking
that I
and
was
showering.
prepping for really last minute, and I ended up using ChatGPT not to write my lecture, but to look things up more efficiently. I just felt so guilty after because I was like, wow, I just killed like a lot of trees and used a lot of water to write this lecture. I'm trying to use it less now.
Yeah.
it's a complicated thing. I mean, the water part is not complicated. That part's really fucked up. Other parts of it, I guess, are complicated. But you gotta do what you gotta do. I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah.
I think you should find someone to help you program it. Got a teamwork.
Perhaps.
I thought you had someone in mind.
No.
The friend from North Carolina who you...
Oh, maybe. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, so there's that.
I'd like to go to the mosque twice this Ramadan.
Okay. I think last Ramadan I went pretty much every week except for 1 week.
You did, yeah. I went, I think, maybe
to,
twice last Ramadan. That was it.
Yeah. That would be good.
Spicy goal?
I think for me more, also more prayer. I'd like to just read more Quran.
I'd like to pray together at least once a day. I think that'd be nice. That happens pretty naturally during Ramadan, but
yeah,
at least once separately and at least once together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really just want to put an emphasis on like community. Like we are going to be doing stuff and we're going to be opening up our home, but I just want to make sure that I am part of that as much as possible.
Yeah, we already have a iftar invite for Sunday, which will be nice with somewhat new friends.
Yeah.
And we also always like host an iftar so we'll still do that outside of the cafe, which would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cute. This is going to be what, our 4th iftar, I think, that we've hosted together.
That sounds right.
One you had to leave because of a family emergency, but yeah, it's our 4th one that we've prepped for together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, this article.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Set it up.
I was thinking of kind of going through it like step by step. Does that work for you?
Let's give an overview and then go through it.
Sounds good. So I think the subtitle kind of gives the overview. The Boomerang Comes Back is the title. And then the subtitle is How the U.S.-Backed War on Palestine is Expanding Authoritarianism at Home, from Project Esther to Violence at the Border. Nora Erekat, the author, is a really renowned Palestinian American activist. She's a lawyer, done some really important work.
I think the central metaphor here is based on the Aimé Césaire. How do you say that? Césaire?
Yeah, I think so.
Idea of the Imperial boomerang, right?
Do you know who he taught?
Foucault.
Close. Think about it.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Someone like Foucault?
But closer.
Closer.
Geographically.
I don't know.
Fanon.
Oh.
They're both from Martinique.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, the article is talking about how repression against Palestinian activists for Palestine at home and then also violence against Palestinians abroad is boomerang back in the U.S. with increased authoritarianism on multiple fronts. And I just thought it was such a helpful, well-articulated explanation. And while Palestine is definitely the most pertinent example, like within our lifetimes, within, recent years, I do feel like the general kind of like death of American empire that we're living through, which by the way, is so not fun, not surprisingly, is a little bit of a consequence of like what we have wrought on the world finally coming home in fuller force for more of the population. I mean, there's always been that kind of direct relationship between like the more money we invest in the military, the more militarized our police become, right? And the same tanks that we send abroad eventually get used against us. And it's always been the case that like our more vulnerable populations are more subject to that kind of violence. But there is a kind of just like hyper privatization of the US and like unraveling of American society that kind of feels like something that we have played out on a lot of other countries now happening here at home. Yeah.
Yep. So I will say, without giving away too much, I think this is also a really good setup to our next episode that we're going to be doing, getting a little bit more into how the Liberal Party also supports and helps give way to rising fascism in the U.S. Okay, so you want to take us kind of highlight by highlight here? I've got it pulled up.
Yeah, so the kind of beginning, she starts with talking about her sadness over seeing like social media content from like Harris supporters and lesser evil Democratic voters, and kind of people blaming Palestinians and also those who were really pro-Palestine for the outcome. And she notes, I think, this uncomfortable truth that I continue to grapple with, that a lot of people who have seen Palestinians and Palestine supporters protesting the Democratic Party, you know, feel like some sympathy for the cause, but just like because of widespread censorship and media bias, just there's no way that they've seen the kind of same stream of atrocities in Gaza that people who are more plugged into that issue and communities that are affected have seen. They're just, and I know that for a fact based on people that I love who are just not consuming the same media that I am. And we all have our blind spots, but the fact that we are siloed to the point that we are not all able to equally access a genocide that our tax dollars are funding is really kind of shows how, again, eroded media already was, and how rightfully eroded a lot of Americans' trust in institutions already was. Mm-hmm. So she starts with that. And then she has, I thought, this kind of good paragraph that I'll read here. Simply put, most people have no idea to what extent this genocide is being perpetuated, not only by Israel, but also by the United States. For a solid majority of the center left, what is happening in Gaza is tragic, but ultimately less important than the most significant existential threat, the ascendance of Trump. And I want to differentiate here between, like, I felt some frustration with some folks being like, don't complain about Trump. Like, I think it's totally okay to be afraid of Trump and to think about your own self-interest, to think about the kind of potential threats that you've already, or not even just threats, but like the way that your career has been impacted, the way that your livelihood is being impacted. And at the same time, that's obviously literally nothing compared to people who have just had their entire homeland decimated, right? Like, I think both of those things can be true. Like, it's okay to complain about what's happening in the US if you are currently living through it. But the idea that it is like an existential threat in the same way that like there are no universities left in Gaza as an existential threat is just like not even really comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll read a little bit more from the next paragraph. But resisting fascism is our collective goal. We just know that in order to resist it, we have to fight it on two fronts of U.S. state violence, at home and abroad. Because if the United States, together with Israel, manages to disembowel the ICJ, the ICC, the UN, and a broader global order built after the Holocaust and World War II, then no one is safe. And again, we're seeing this acceleration under Trump, right? I mean, it's a complete kind of flipping of our previous geopolitical alliances. Europe is moving away from us. Canada is moving away from us, or at least Western Europe. We're forcing poor Ukraine to like pay us in minerals, which is so gross.
Rocks.
It's like so
cool rocks.
Man, it's so sad. Like,
that's what I would have done if I was in fourth grade and became president, just because I liked rocks so much.
Yeah.
You ever collect those like really shiny, colorful ones?
My sister did.
Yeah.
They were really heavy. I
hope that's what we're getting from Ukraine. That'd be awesome. That'd be really good for our economy.
Yeah. So like, I mean, right. Again, like we're kind of becoming a pariah state, but such a heavily armed pariah state. And we also have for the last, half a century provided defense for so many countries that they have no like choice in the interim, but to kind of negotiate with us. But this kind of unraveling of the global order was already underway again, in the way that we just kind of like didn't respect international institutions, the way that we actively targeted like UNRWA and like a UN agency. We already started to kind of turn the American public against the international order.
Yeah. I think I was talking actually to someone about this after the Sudan event, and it's not like all that new or interesting of an idea, but I was saying that I do think the Trump presidency and what at the same time as what Israel is doing in Gaza, these things that appear to be aberrations to kind of like a centrist liberal order are actually, I don't want to say good, but they are clarifying in that a lot of these kind of talking out of your two sides of your mouth sort of way about like, for Israelis or for liberal Zionists, I put that in quotes, always gesturing toward, oh, like there can be a two-state solution, or I'm a liberal Zionist and that I don't necessarily believe in like a Jewish supremacy, but I believe in the Jewish ethnicity. And what is happening since October 7th is a very it is a clarification on Zionism as no, this is actually like what that project looked like and has to look like from the beginning, right? There's no liberal indirect way to get around it, right? All that liberal veneer to the liberal Zionism term was getting at what's happening now as indirectly as possible, giving it like a valence of democracy. And in the US, I think what the Joe Biden and Obama presidencies have done is give the US a very imperial force in the US at a time that it's like trying to reckon with that, like all the historical legacies and people were talking about identity politics and reparations, and like they were trying to reconcile all these like historical atrocities that have been done in the history of the US. And they're saying, we've had a black president. Now's the time. The U.S. can finally atone for its sins, and it's can still keep things mostly the way they are, but it's it's now a force for good in the world. I think again, like the Trump presidency is just kind of like a mask off, veneer off moment that is just like it's not necessarily an aberration. It is an extension. And it is a clarification of like the logic of an imperialist nation.
I definitely agree with you when it comes to like foreign policy, or really specifically for Palestine. Like, yes, it's just a mask off kind of moment. Like Trump releasing that like AI generated image of him standing like a godlike statue in Gaza. Did you see this?
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous. And
well, that's why we're getting all the minerals from Ukraine.
Right.
He's got to build that.
Yeah. It's ridiculous and it's abhorrent. But like, again, like so was funding a genocide. Like, it's not like any worse than anything Biden did,
yeah.
Right?
No, but I guess that's her point, right? Is that
right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say that's her point. Is that there's no real difference between the Democrat kind of liberal order and the Trump regime.
Yeah. So I'm saying I agree with you when it comes to Palestine, but where I don't agree is I do think that I think it's important not to overstate how badly things are unraveling and at what an accelerated rate domestically. I mean, I do think there's a world of difference between, so many more people are vulnerable now and will continue to be vulnerable. And like, look, you could have a kind of cynical long-term view and say like, that's the price to pay for the fall of the US and for the fall of the unipolar world. Mm-hmm. I think ideally, especially those of us who are like in what probably will not be for the rest of our lifetimes, the heart of global empire.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, and I think we share this probably, to try and just make sure as many people are not hurt here as possible during this transition, right?
Sure.
Because it's so many people. It's people who are undocumented. It's the accelerationist rate of like hate against like minorities, against Muslims, against Black people, against women. Now there's talks about like changing names for voting and how that can affect your ability to vote, which was meant to target trans people, could also now target like women who have changed their name when they got married. I didn't do, but still other women should be able to vote still.
Yeah.
Just like the Orwellian shit that's happening even on the university level is kind of astounding and just like was literally unimaginable even like a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not all rhetoric. There are actual consequences. So many federal employees have lost their jobs. I just want to be careful not to like skate past that.
No, I don't mean to skate past it. And I guess what I'm about to say, I don't necessarily mean to make this like a theoretical exercise, because I agree with you that a lot of people are who have been vulnerable for a long time are kind of facing the consequences of living in a system where all of these protections and all of these rights were just like held together with glue and popsicle sticks to begin with.
It looks like Medicaid's going to get cut at
right?
crazy levels.
I've been listening today to a podcast on like Rawls, John Rawls, and like his like theory of justice or whatever, and like his whole like veil of ignorance, right? So if you're designing a society, you would put yourself behind a veil of ignorance and design it such that like you don't know where you would be, right? Like if you ask someone who's like 6'5" and like really athletic and very good looking to design a system, they'd probably be biased toward benefiting people like themselves. But if you say like you don't know who in the society you're going to be, chances are they would design it a lot more equally, right? And the idea is that a lot of the systems that we have just are not designed from a standpoint of like how do we distribute justice to everyone, right? And I think Rawls, based on the very little I know, would say that a lot of these systems are unjust and that these rights never really were there to begin with, just because they were always like predicated or, designed by or managed by institutions that never really cared about distributive justice, I guess. But
I mean, that's true. I mean, that must be true, right? Because like a lot of things that we thought were enshrined in law, like apparently aren't.
Yeah, they're
and
just,
also, like,
they're just and even the things,
even like the law, like which we've always known is a little arbitrary, is like way more arbitrary than we thought.
No, that's exactly right. Like even the things that are supposedly in the Constitution, the thing that everyone always cites back to, are now up for like debate.
Yeah, but
so it's like
again, like even if there was not, if the systems themselves were not equitable, which I hear you, they are less so now. And I mean, I hope that like something emerges from the ashes. I think that we have to work towards that because what other option do we have?
Yeah.
But I don't know that will happen. It could just get worse. You know what I mean? I'm like, I am definitely for like, I think we are pretty closely aligned, but I would say I think I'm a smidge more work within the system you have than you are. Ideologically, I don't think it really plays out that much.
It's a case by case issue for me. I don't know.
I would say it's a pretty good generalization for us both.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's exceptions. So I don't know. I like, just again, to be selfish for a second, like I'm curious if we feel equal amounts of panic. Like I've been thinking about like, where will we go if we have to? I mean, that in of itself is a privileged thought. I'm not sure that everyone would think that. You know what I mean? And to be clear, we're not going anywhere. There's nowhere for us actually even to really go. We don't really have options even if we wanted to.
We can go back to Thomasville.
Well, that's still very much in the U.S. love. That's really one of the worst parts. No
But
offense.
Thomasville is kind of more of like a theory or imagined space.
No, Thomasville is a very
outside,
real.
existing outside.
What are you talking about? Thomasville is a very real, depressed North Carolina town that I will die before I live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like to be having these kind of panicked thoughts about like, should we transfer money outside of the U.S.? Like, should I, you know what I mean? Like, what kind of contingency plans can we make? I'm in it to win it. I'll be here as long as I possibly can. But there is a point where it's like, yikes, I mean, if I can't teach, if I can't work here, if it's illegal to talk about Islam or race, I mean, I don't know.
I don't necessarily think about that unless I then start thinking about
You're still not a planner.
kids.
Same. That's when I think about it.
But then for me, I also think about, well, we knew the end of American empire had to come about at some point. And leftists have for a long time described the end of American empire as a positive thing in the world, potentially, although I don't think that's necessarily true. Like it could happen.
With how many nukes we have, yeah.
Well, yeah, it could
and how
happen
big our military is.
in a really scary, bad way that actually ruins the world. So I'm not on that tilt, but it's also not necessarily a bad thing, although I do recognize that it does mean people will suffer along the way.
No, I agree. I think it has the potential to be better. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
I think it does have the potential the like military slash nukes is a major asterisk because that's just scary. We are so armed. We're the most armed anyone has ever been in the history of humankind. So that's a little bit terrifying. But like, if things don't go really south in that regard, I think it would be better for the world theoretically, absolutely, to not be unipolar. I just don't think that's like serving anyone well. I think we've wreaked havoc on a lot of countries' sovereignty. We've invaded a lot of places. So like, I agree there. But as someone who is in that place, like, I just don't know what it will mean for those of us who are inside as it falls down.
Right, yeah, you have self-preservation instincts, and that's scary.
Yeah.
But and it doesn't necessarily have to be like this always going forward, but it doesn't seem like things are changing. But what has been proven to be a historical fact is that in moments, like in a lot of inflection point moments when we could have gone another way and start to decrease the effective American empire, to decrease the US's output of, emissions that contribute to climate change, to decrease the rising inequality in the US. And it is rising. You can see like the Gini coefficient in the US has been going up steadily since it's been measured. There are a lot of like horrors and just like really painful parts of the U.S. hegemony and the U.S. order that could have been changed by now, and we have chosen to not. And when I say we, I just mean collectively. Like, the system that we have does not want to change them, does not give people the ability or power to change them. And so what other options are there but for the system to just be completely deteriorated, for people to build something entirely new? Because it doesn't seem like reform from within is actually moving the needle much on some of the biggest issues.
I think it will be pretty new just because our loss of standing in the world is going to be so great after this administration, in a way that like it probably should have been earlier, like after the Iraq War, after the Vietnam War. But yeah. I think it's going to be we're acting in ways that are so outlandish and so outside of like international norms that I think that it will be a new US. And like maybe it'll be like a UK kind of situation where like obviously the British Empire no longer exists, but the UK does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Will something totally new be rebuilt from the ashes? To me, I mean, I think we also are somewhat aligned on this. To me, that would have to be more of like a global project of like emergence out of like the nation state. And so, I mean, maybe this is the beginning of that. I don't know, but I don't know if we'll see that in our lifetimes. It's possible. I mean, I do think that's even going to be a rougher situation to get there. I don't wish to live through that necessarily.
Well, you were born at a bad time.
No, it's a Gandalf quote. We all do what we can with the times we're given. I believe that. Like, it is what it is. And I also believe that like I'm very committed to the US. I really am. Like, I'm committed to like the history of like resistance and struggle in this country. That's the only thing about this country that really means anything to me. I'm committed to all the communities that I've been invested in, all the people that I love. Like, I have no desire to go anywhere. But I do sometimes feel panicky falling asleep at night being like, fuck, what if we like need to leave soon and we can't, you know?
I do think about, so I was going to say, I don't think about leaving as much as I think about, should I get a weapon? And no. I know you're not going to let me have a gun, I keep thinking about sword.
You just want a sword. This is not even because of the fall of Empire. You just want a sword.
I think I need a sword.
That's so silly. You wanted a sword for forever.
But now I need one.
No, you don't. I hate when people are like, I need a weapon because everyone has a weapon. That's how we're all going to die. I never will keep a gun in my house. The day I think I need to keep a gun in my house, I don't know, it's over. We've heard gunshots in so many places that we've lived, and I still have never felt the need to have a gun in my house.
Think about this. Someone calls you the B word on the bus, and I'm with you.
Bitch?
Yeah.
Okay. And then are we not allowed to say that on the podcast?
I pull out my sword. I don't say that. I pull out my sword and I make him kneel before you before I behead him.
I don't think this is not necessarily relevant to our current political climate.
That's going to be the political climate we live in. Where
I've been
guys
called
are
a
just
bitch before on the street. I just kept on walking. What else can you do? That's not a new situation.
If you had a sword, you could.
Oh, no.
spill his guts right there on the sidewalk.
No, I'm not afraid of like my fellow Americans, honestly. Like generally speaking, most of the time I feel perfectly safe. I'm just nervous about like the number of people who are going to be pushed over the edge and lose everything. I mean, that's the other thing, I guess. Like I never feel nervous in like red parts of this country or purple parts of this country the way that I know some people do. So what am I afraid of? I guess I'm just afraid of like the economy crashing and like our savings meaning nothing, or I am afraid very selfishly with like Elon identifying every civil rights organization and like nonprofit that has Islam or Muslim in the title, like what that could mean for us.
Yeah.
And for our livelihoods too, like our ability to like find work, you know? I mean, I'm really having a hard time thinking about how I'll put together syllabi based on my research without using any of these, you know, quote unquote DEI words. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to do what I've been doing, obviously. But anyway, should we go back to the article? You have any other thoughts?
No.
We're here, obviously. I'm just saying it's scary. All right. It is thus unsurprising that throughout the election cycle, nearly all the mainstream liberal pundits sounding the alarm about white supremacy, jingoism, xenophobia, and political violence failed to connect these things to U.S. imperial violence. Absolutely. Again, this reminds me of a Malcolm X quote, actually, which was after JFK was shot. He said, "The roosters have come home," or something like that. And he actually got in a lot of trouble for it. People thought it was really insensitive.
Is it the chickens have come home to roost?
That's right. Thank you.
Okay.
That's the correct saying.
Yeah, that's
I swear English is my only language and first language.
the roosters have come home. Doesn't really hit.
It's not
well, the roosters have come home. What's that, Malcolm? You know, roosters.
Poor
you know how they
Malcolm.
come home.
Malcolm's such an eloquent guy, and I'm butchering his.
They go out, I don't know, doing whatever roosters
I barely
do.
know. Roosters are male chickens, right?
Yeah.
I'm impressed I even know that. But anyway, he was basically saying like the violence that we have wrought on the world through the Vietnam War at that time was like the main issue, but just in general through regime change throughout the world, like is now coming home to us. And people were really upset. And it was kind of like a bit of a rude thing to say, given that someone had just gotten killed. And he was actually censored for saying it by the Nation of Islam at the time, which he was still affiliated with. But there is something to that, right? Like not that particular incident, but that sentiment, I think, that is very resonant. And that also applies to like violence, right? It's not surprising that when, for example, we stir up like crazy conspiracy theories about China, not saying that China's a perfect state. Most nation states absolutely suck, China included. But when we have like really ridiculous theories and like just baseless like suspicion as if like they are our civilizational mortal enemy, that does rebound in how like Asian Americans are treated in the US. You know, these things are connected.
By the way, I just saw a video. China's #1 in high-speed rail. China's #1 in EV sales. China's #1 in like another category that I was just like, the U.S. is getting killed where it matters.
And I mean, our universities are going to be at like half their capacity within a year. So that'll just amplify.
Yep.
And here's the quote on which this whole article is based. In his searing 1950 polemic, Discourse on Colonialism, Martinician writer Aimé Césaire wrote of the boomerang effect, whereby violence in the colonial periphery manifests itself in the colonial metropole. And so essentially, I think Ericott is drawing an analogy here where like, though the US is not technically a colonial power, the likes of which like France and England were at their heights of empire, we really are. We have a lot of territory. We have a lot of military bases. It may not be as official that we have colonies throughout the world. I mean, there are some territories that are obviously colonial, like Guam and Puerto Rico and that sort of thing. But we have a lot of neo-colonial relationships with states like Egypt, like Israel, and the kind of violence that we are kind of allowing to happen there, even like directly sanctioning or directly paying for in like Palestine is coming home a bit.
Yes. So I think she makes it clear in another paragraph in which she kind of talks about how 84% of Democrats supported a ceasefire, Despite that, you saw armed police on university rooftops and snipers who were pointing their weapons at students. I think people forget that when, New York sent in the SWAT team into Columbia, a gun was fired at the students. So weapons were discharged. They used heavily repressive tactics. And so this kind of lays bare the level of authoritarianism despite, a popular will that goes against what the state is willing to tolerate.
This reminds me of a conversation we had a few podcasts ago about like how freedom of speech is really under threat at universities, but how university admin basically ushered that in through their suppression of pro-Palestine speech. Mm-hmm. And now they're just like weaker. They're not able to kind of like stand up for it because they've already kind of weakened that muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she kind of talks about how within and outside of academia, people who are sympathetic or, Palestine activists have been facing harassment. Palestine Legal reports that in 5 months after October 7th, the organization received more than 1,500 reports of harassment, abuse, doxing, and loss of employment, a sevenfold increase over the whole of 2020. The Council on American Islamic Relations likewise reports that in their final quarter of 2023, it received a 178% increase in reports compared to the same period in 2022. All this to say nothing of outright violence against Palestinians, including the shooting of 3 Palestinian American college students in Burlington, Vermont, and the killing of a 6-year-old Wadia Al-Fayumi, who was stabbed 26 times in his home by his 71-year-old landlord.
I remember that, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't thought about it for a while. It did not stay in the news as long as it should have.
No, it didn't. But if it was a young Jewish boy who that had happened to, we'd still be hearing about it.
Right, as we should, but the double standard is really upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one is outraged by that. No one's sickened by that. No one thinks about that as being an instance or it portends a horrible. Sorry, the cat's tripping on these cords. Hold on.
Batata, stop.
Go.
Stop trying to podcast, Batata. You're not cut out.
Some horrible sickness or epidemic within the American psyche, the same way that saying free Palestine apparently is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else on those 2 paragraphs?
No, that was perfect.
I do have in this next one, she mentions Daryl Lee, who I know you have read. I did look at those other 2 links. So she cites to something that then cites to something else that I thought might be interesting to bring up. But do you want to talk a little bit about Daryl Lee's work?
I don't have in front of me the exact place that she's citing him, but Daryl Lee has written on terrorism and kind of constructions of the war on terror and sort of the arbitrariness of those constructions. Yeah, is that sort of where she's citing him?
She says, while these crimes were not state-sponsored, they are the direct fallout of U.S. government's complicity in ongoing genocide and its decades-old anti-terrorism laws, which, as Daryl Lee has highlighted, have been constructed specifically to target Palestinians. From the first mention of terrorism in a federal statute in 1969 to the introduction of a government terrorism blacklist and the first immigration law to include terrorism as a grounds for exclusion and deportation. So this cites to a report called Anti-Palestinian at the Core, the Origins and Growing Dangers of U.S. Anti-Terrorism Law.
Oh, I haven't written this to Daryl. Did Lee write this also?
I don't know if he wrote it. He must have been involved, but this cites to an article of his. This was a briefing paper that was put together in February of last year, and it has Palestine Legal as one of the authors, as well as the Center for Constitutional Rights. I'm just going to go real quick here and some of the key findings of this paper, like Nora mentions and kind of cites, is the briefing paper maps how early U.S. anti-terrorism legislation evolved specifically to oppose Palestinian liberation struggles. Key findings include the earliest mention of terrorism in a federal statute in 1969 dealt specifically with restricting humanitarian aids to Palestinian and inaugurated a pattern of rendering Palestinians synonymous with terrorism. So the first time terrorism was used in a statute was to crack down on aid to Palestinians. The first government-issued terrorism blacklist was championed by Israel's supporters and Congress and has been overwhelmingly used to pressure governments accused of supporting Palestinian resistance. The first and only time Congress has labeled a non-state group a terrorist organization was in a 1987 law aimed at the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The first immigration law to include terrorism as a basis for exclusion and deportation singled out the PLO in its definition of terrorist activity. The first law authorizing private terrorism lawsuits was drafted to target the PLO and has been heavily used by dual citizens of Israel and the United States against defendants accused of supporting Palestinian resistance. I want to pause on this one because I think this is potentially where the Darrell Lee article that he published in March of 2023 is kind of cited. And it talks about this court case that ultimately was brought forth by the Jewish National Fund, which I had not heard of until I started reading this. But the JNF actually dates back to 1901 and was originally registered as a charity in England with the purpose of acquiring land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea exclusively for the benefit of Jews. The organization calls itself the operational arm of Zionism, owing to the key role it plays in the colonization process. And what he says later on in the article is that not only does it directly own 10% of land under Israeli rule, but it also has this like quasi-public status where it has half of the seats on the state board that manages 73% of Israel's land. So this is clearly an Israeli organization.
Right.
And it brought forth a lawsuit in U.S. court.
Against the PLO, against someone who had donated to the PLO?
Against the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, a nationwide coalition of groups advocating for Palestinian liberation, accusing them of supporting terrorism.
I feel like this shows again how broken our lobbying system is, but also how much Israel was like a proxy U.S. state, the fact that this is playing out in U.S. courts.
Let me find the section here about exactly what they were suing over. It had something to do with an incidence of Palestinian resistance. 2018 to 2019, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip staged weekly mass demonstrations at the border fence, confining them to the territory, asserting their right to return to their homes, including to lands within walking distance on the other side of the barbed wires. I think it's important to mention that during these like marches to the right of return, Israeli soldiers killed nearly 200 demonstrators and maimed thousands of them, often while safely bunkered down hundreds of meters away. Okay, so the dispute stems from a series of brush fires that were set off when Palestinian demonstrators in the Gaza Strip floated Molotov cocktails over the border fence using kites and balloons. Several dual U.S.-Israeli citizens living in the area claimed that the incendiary terror balloons and kites caused them emotional distress and denied them the use and enjoyment of certain forests and public areas along scenic trails, recreation areas, bicycle trails, and public areas and amenities.
This is so often
no physical injuries are alleged.
Yeah, this is so often the like lack of proportionality where it's like kids are scared because they have to run into bomb shelters, and it's like, okay, kids are dying. Like,
well, it's just like no sense of self-awareness in that in that complaint to be like, oh, they deprived us of the land.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, how do you not get? I mean, so it got thrown out of court, and then the JNF appealed it. They appealed it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld dismissing the case. So I guess that's good. But like, it just goes to show you how, I guess, going back to the article that Nora published, how these laws are just kind of used to tamp down and create a greater atmosphere of authoritarianism.
Yeah, and circling back to the article, and to kind of your point of the double standards of even like people of Israeli or Palestinian descent in the U.S. or Israelis or Palestinians in the U.S. In 2001, the Bush administration shut down the Holy Land Foundation, HLF, a humanitarian organization that built orphanages, distributed food, supported schools, and provided healthcare to Palestinians under Israeli rule, as well as in refugee camps. And so in this kind of post 9/11 moment, the Bush administration charged its founders with working on behalf of quote unquote Hamas under the Patriot Act. I was actually just talking to my students about this. We've been covering the Patriot Act in class this week. But the thing that was really bizarre was that the recipients of the foundation's, the Holy Land Foundation's grants, also received U.S. government aid. So they obviously weren't affiliated with Hamas at the time. They were, what were considered to be internationally reputable sources to give aid to. And in the trial in 2008, there was an anonymous witness who turned out to be an Israeli intelligence officer who used secret evidence. So yeah, we see this kind of like coming up again and again. And actually the kind of basis of that trial, which basically ruled that you can kind of have charges associated with terror on the basis of like giving, to Ericott's broader point, has been used as a, what's the word I'm looking for? Precedent. In cases as recently as like the Cop City cases in Georgia, where people who donated for bail funds for those who had been who are protesting, are charged with giving almost like as if they're giving like domestic terrorism, which is kind of crazy.
And not only that, but in a lot of those cases, the attorneys generals or the prosecutors who are prosecuting those cases are trying to use RICO statutes which were designed to tamp down on organized crime.
The mob.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's it's not like it's a very direct connection between the charges that have been levied against pro-Palestine organizations, the suppression of those organizations, and then setting legal precedent for suppressing other groups, including Black Lives Matter, environmental solidarity groups. Which is, I'm drawing that from Ericott's article. It's not my own argument, but I think it's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's all I had. She ends with this line: surviving this next chapter demands that we see ourselves as the rest of the world sees us too. Did you have anything before that?
No.
I think that it was really well articulated. We'll link it in the show notes. And again, I think that she's speaking about Palestine specifically, but this could apply to a lot of the way that the U.S. has conducted itself in terms of foreign policy, sort of rebounding at home in this moment in a much more magnified way than we've seen previously. Yeah. I'm thinking now of other historical parallels. There's also kind of like the whole Red Scare and the Cold War and the way that kind of played out with McCarthyism in the U.S. It's not like this is unprecedented, but it does feel like it's hitting multiple levels of society at a kind of accelerated rate, and that part is somewhat unprecedented.
Yeah.
May we boomerang into something better.
Well, I think the idea of the boomerang is that
to stop the boomerang.
It's the same thing. It's just coming,
No, I know. I was just trying to extend you're right. It doesn't work. May we stop the boomerang. That's better.
Well, it stops when it gets here.
Okay, but we have to make sure it doesn't keep on going.
Yeah, we just have to not throw it again.
Okay, may we not boomerang.
Yeah.
And may something good be born out of this moment. I mean, I think it's important not to be too defeatist. Like, anything could happen. It's a moment of wild transition. I hope something better comes out of this. I hope you're right and that new systems are born.
I don't know. I don't know if new systems will be born. I think the ones we have will just be rendered much more ineffective, which again is not necessarily a bad thing as long as they are not actively prosecuting everyone.
I think that they already are starting to prosecute everyone, but
No,
yeah.
I know, but if that element of it just goes away,
But it's not going to go away.
yeah, we'll see. Well, speaking of good articles, I've got a really good one for us to go through real quick.
Nice.
If you've got the time.
I've got the time, man. I'm
This-
going to have some. Where'd my tea go that you made me?
It's
here
right
it is.
there. So this was a really good article. Again, kind of keeping on the theme of Palestine. I brought up an argument that I never really thought of before. I do not have a Wall Street Journal subscription, so unfortunately we can't read the whole thing. But, I think the headline says it all. And a really, really good, astute question. Opinion piece by Sadanand Doom. Heard of him?
No.
Well, I think that says something about you
Okay.
that you haven't.
Who is that?
Opinion. If Indians and Pakistanis can relocate, why can't Gazans?
Oh, I heard
Good
of this.
question.
Yeah. Astaghfirullah.
Because from what I remember, partition was like a fun time, right? It was good. It was like everyone got to like pack up their stuff and like go on a little camping
I'm so
trip.
glad that you brought that up. I forgot about that. That was outrageous.
This is in the Wall Street Journal
Yeah.
by a regular columnist.
Yeah.
I perused through his what else he's written, and the guy hates Muslims.
I was gonna
If
say
I had to guess,
something.
probably like a Modi guy.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
He's atheist, but
Worships
you know,
the state.
yeah,
Astaghfirullah. Yeah.
and he's a Bernard Schwartz fellow. You ever heard of Bernard Schwartz?
Nah.
Zionist.
Nice. Yeah, partition was like one of the largest, if not the largest, transfer of people ever. Conservative estimate that 1 million people died during that transfer. It was done super poorly. Whatever your feelings on whether there should have been an India and a Pakistan and then eventually also a Bangladesh, it was very poorly executed. The British official who drew the map lines had never been to the region. Classic. He was working with outdated maps. So it was just a lot of panic and a lot of people turning on their neighbors. Really horrific stuff.
Not only that, but it directly preceded an arms race that arguably made the entire world less safe.
Preceded or you? Yeah. Right. After that happened, the arms race. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not so worried about that part?
No.
Okay. All right. Do you think
I
the
mean, because
nuclear-
both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons, like they can't really do anything. You know what I mean? They would really risk hurting their own people if they were to use them. I mean, yeah, it's a problem, but I feel like a greater problem is that they're both failed states that like hate their minorities and suppress the shit out of them. You know, they in themselves are problems.
That was one. Did I have another one up? Oh, by the way, yes, like I said, he is a Bernard Schwartz fellow at like the East or like the Asia Policy Institute. I forget what it's called.
The
you know,
worst.
You know who
Stacey's-
Bernard Schwartz donated a shitload of money to?
Who?
Bill and Hillary Clinton.
Nice.
Just kind of goes to show you that this is not, again, just like not one party.
Ahmed's really focused on
It's not
that.
one party. It's like they're both pieces of shit.
I just wanted to check. So 1 million is not a low conservative estimate. That is the estimate from scholars. So yeah. Estimates range from 200,000 to 2 million. Most people think around 1 million. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like the worst daisies are rising to the top, man. What's happening?
Vivek is gone now. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what happened to him.
He got kicked off the Doge team. That was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was early. Can't wait until Elon finally crumbles.
I saw some people are reporting. Okay, so Pope Francis is
Sick.
looks like he's dying. But
Yeah, I like Pope
now
Francis.
getting better. Who knows? But people have been noting that Donald Trump's hands have been very bruised, which in old people, I guess, is a direct antecedent to you dying. I don't know. It's like, it's not a good sign if you just like have bruises all over your body.
Yeah. I honestly don't want Trump to die because I'm worried that Elon will somehow become president, even though it's not legal.
Isn't that crazy? Is that for me in my head, I was just like, oh yeah, he will be president. But
he's not even like an elected official.
He's not even an elected official.
I know. I guess technically it would be Vance, but it doesn't feel like he's doing much. So he's also creepy.
Where's he been?
I don't know. He's definitely nothing compared to Elon.
Yeah.
If someone, okay, I probably can't say this.
No,
if someone had to drop ill of natural causes, I hope it's Elon.
Yeah.
I hope everyone burns the shit out of their Teslas.
Well, they'll do that by themselves. You just have to keep driving them.
Right.
No, legit. I was watching videos earlier of some of these Chinese electric vehicles that if it weren't for the tariffs that, or we would have, or I guess we just don't import those, like Tesla would be done.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these vehicles that China is putting out are just so much better and so much more fully featured.
I believe that. I mean, they totally cooked us with their AI, with less resources, with DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the age of American ingenuity is perhaps not gone forever, but greatly diminished. But also, it's kind of funny that we like talk this big game about like unrestricted capitalism, and yet we have to put so many like safeguards so that we don't have these products from China. It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Or even like affiliated with China, like TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly.
I mean, it owns a vast majority of the world's like mineral resources, which again, is not great. No, I think China leads in some of that stuff. Oh. And it's probably going to do better on AI. It seems like it's leading in terms of like other methods of generating energy. Like I think it's them and like France that are really vying for like at the cutting edge of like fusion or fission energy or whatever the fuck.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in China.
Meanwhile, our president is generating videos of himself as a golden statue.
He's like literally like a golden calf. It's like so like blasphemous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think last note that I have here is yesterday was the 1 year marker. It's always weird to say anniversary, but 1 year marker since Aaron Bushnell self-immolated outside of the Capitol. So I think it's just important to kind of keep thinking about that and what that means. And a friend of ours, Ryan D'Souza, actually wrote a really good piece in Mondo Weiss, so I'll link to that as well. Just real quick, I'll call out a couple things that I just did not realize. I do know that a lot of media outlets, when they first reported about it, they kind of wanted it to seem like this not planned thing, or that it was the result of mental illness and that there was no real ideology or message behind it, despite him recording the video saying that he's going to take part in an extreme act of protest. But there are facts in here that I think Ryan found in the course of writing this article, that he gave family his savings. He had like a $500,000 insurance policy that he gave. He gave his cat to his neighbors or friends or something with like $2,000. He left a note to a friend saying he loved them.
Yeah, it was clearly planned.
It was clearly planned.
I think most people knew that at the time. I mean, maybe not on mainstream
I don't
media,
think people
but
knew those facts. Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, mainstream media kind of wanted to suspend it. But like, just knowing those facts alone, you understand that this man really sat with his decision for a while and still was not swayed away from feeling like, that's what had to happen. And ultimately, I think the conclusion Ryan comes to is that this is something that did not have to happen. It's like the ultimate act of feeling like exasperated and desperate, right? And knowing that it's not going to change anything about the system you're in. But you still do it anyway. And even then, it's like a very powerful yet helpless action to have taken. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I was talking to a friend about this actually somewhat recently. I do struggle a little bit with this aspect of, I think it can be an act of genuine sacrifice and martyrdom. And also there are so many Palestinians that are fighting to live.
Yeah.
And I don't know that this changed anything or anyone's opinion in a way that he may have. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think that's what he's saying is that even Aaron had to have known that it wasn't going to like ultimately change anything. But you could not sit with the guilt of being like, I know I am directly responsible for this thing and that I cannot live with or abide. It's anyway, I think it's worth pausing and reflecting on, and definitely worth reading the piece. So we'll link to it as well. I think it's a really well done piece, but
I'll read it after this. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, check it out. Okay, I think that's it.
Ramadan Mubarak, everyone.
Yep,
Hope
Ramadan
that you
Kareem.
have a relaxed month.
Yeah. Bye.